Welcome to the Navigating Solo podcast, a dedicated platform where we explore the unique needs and concerns of solo aging with a focus on empowerment, connection, and proactive planning. I'm your host, Aileen Gerhardt, and today I am pleased to welcome our guest, Eric Blake. Eric is a certified financial planner and the founder of Blake Wealth Management, a financial planning firm based in McKinney, Texas. With over 25 years of experience, Eric specializes in retirement planning, tax planning, and investment management for women over 55, including those who are single by choice, divorced, or widowed. His personal experiences being raised by a single mother and having witnessed his grandmother navigate widowhood at the young age of 62 have fueled his passion for empowering women to achieve financial independence in retirement. Eric is also the host of the Simply Retirement podcast, where he and his guests provide insight and education on retirement planning to help women live their retirement on their terms. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
Aileen, I am so excited to be here. I'm honored to be a guest on the podcast. And I just have to say, if it's okay with you, I have developed such a respect for the work that you do and other patient advocates. Unfortunately, I've personally seen some of these challenges that we face with our families, just trying to understand healthcare system.
Mm.
It's Greek or something to so many people, especially when you're trying to get the care that you need. A year ago, I couldn't even say that I knew what an advocate does, but I've learned very quickly that you need somebody like you on your side.
Thank you for that and for increasing awareness about the impact of healthcare advocacy.
Absolutely.
We all can benefit from extra support, especially at times of stress, emotional complication, all of that. So, thank you for that. And
Absolutely.
that's why it's great to know great people in all different disciplines because life is about teamwork. Let's get started. We'll dive into what some feel can be a daunting subject, retirement, and that anyone can really feel that to be something that is hard to navigate. But for solo agers, there are unique challenges that are faced. Are there some key things that people should be thinking about as they approach this phase of life? And are there specific strategies you'd like to suggest people might consider?
I think the first thing for me as a financial planner, it's to understand what has led an individual transitioning into retirement. Maybe they're already retired to be a solo agent. Was it by choice? Have they been, or was it because they're divorced or they've been widowed? Because, or are they far away from children, or maybe they don't have any children? All those types of things are important to understand. Yeah, because each of those circumstances can change the perspective of what that individual's view of retirement might be.
Mm,
If they're single by choice, or if they've been single for quite a while, it's possible that they could have a pretty good idea of what they want retirement to look like. But if it's someone that is going into retirement or retired and they've recently experienced a divorce or
mm,
they've been widowed, it is very possible that their view of retirement has been completely turned over on its head in the very recent past. So understanding this, it also helps us start putting together the potential pieces of what I call the retirement puzzle. But starting to get a picture of what you want retirement to look like. How are you going to spend your time? Are you going to work in some capacity? What do you want this to look like before we can really start putting all the pieces
mm,
together? Want to know what the vision is, right? So then we think about, then we look at it as a solo ager. It's easy to get caught up in something of a rut. One of the things I actually recommend, if you aren't yet retired, maybe you're a couple of years away, practice retirement. Live on what you think you can live on. Live on what you think you're going to have before you get there. Do the things that you plan to do. Do the things you think you may want to do to make sure you actually like doing those things.
mhm.
So I think that's a big piece as well. So have a vision of what you want retirement to look like, but practice before you get there so you can start making little adjustments and tweaks before you're in the middle of it. Because then we can start looking at, well, what are the resources that we're going to have available to start making this a reality? Start thinking about what Social Security filing strategies does an individual have available to them. Again, depending on whether they're single or whether they're divorced or whether they're widowed. what tax strategies are going to apply. We always talk about part of our job as a financial planner was reducing your lifetime tax liability.
Mm.
So that takes proactive planning in order to do that. And again, like I talked about earlier, I described retirement as just very much like a puzzle. And we had to start putting these little pieces together, your social security, your taxes, your income, to start again forming a picture of what you want to do, what you want retirement to look like for the next what could be 20, 30, 35 plus years.
That's a very practical way to look at it, and I think that an excellent suggestion, as well as I don't know that everyone approaches it that way. Do you find you have colleagues in the financial planning world who also approach that model that way?
I think that's where, if you're really looking at hiring a financial advisor as you make the transition into retirement, I think one of the things you really have to be aware of is what is that advisor's expertise?
Mm,
Because one of the things I'm a very strong believer in is that, and if a financial advisor cannot specialize in everything for everybody,
right.
the decisions you're making as a solo ager at age 55, 60, 65 are not the same decisions you are making when you were 30, 35, or 40. So if you don't have an advisor that understands those implications, you can make some significant mistakes, especially around things like social security or taxes, especially. So when you start thinking about, I spent the last 40 years of my life putting money into my retirement accounts or my IRAs or my 401ks, how do I start getting that out? What are the tax implications? Which account should I be choosing from first? How does that play into Social Security? Do I start at Social Security at 62? Do I start Social Security at 70? Am I eligible for survivor benefits with Social Security? All those types of things that, as an advisor, if I don't understand those, how can I provide the best guidance possible? But you as the consumer, you may not know. So that's actually one of the things. I actually did an episode on my podcast about the top 10 questions you should ask your financial advisor if you're
Mm.
planning for retirement.
We'll make sure to link that because that in and of itself, being able to self-advocate and ask questions to make sure someone is the right fit for you as you are as a consumer for that professional. Are there when we're thinking about solo agers and your knowledge, are there particular statistics or numbers that might illustrate some of the story in a way that might be helpful to listeners or viewers?
I think there's a few that I think are typically very surprising. Again, with our practice, we primarily focus on working with women. And the first of these statistics is actually related to financial advisors and where I think as we as an industry have really dropped the ball when it comes to supporting women.
Mm,
And that is that over 70% of women will change their financial advisor after losing a husband, whether that's through divorce or widowed, whatever the reason
right.
is, they will change advisors 70% of the time, at more than 70% of the time within the 12 months of losing their husband. And that's because, again, a lot of our industry has, they hate to pigeonhole everybody in our industry. They speak to the man, right? They say, yeah, thanks for the input, Mrs. Jones, but I'm going to be focusing on what
Right.
Mr. Jones has to say. As soon as Mr. Jones is gone, which statistically happens more often than not,
Mhm.
now Mrs. Jones is saying, well, you didn't want to talk to me now, or then I don't want to talk to you now.
Some of those societal quote unquote
Right.
norms, which hopefully are changing sooner rather than later. And certainly with good professionals like you and that approach, hopefully that will have a ripple effect as well. One of the, and you've mentioned this a couple of times, one of the things I find really fascinating about your work is your choice to focus on working with women. How did that decision come about for you?
And again, all great stories come with with your from your past, and it a lot of stems from seeing my. I never actually knew my biological father, so he and my mom divorced before I was about a year old. So I have no recollection, and he made whatever reason made the decision not to be part of my life. But I had a grandfather who was.
Mm,
He's actually the one that I call daddy. Because everybody else around me called him daddy, so I called him daddy. So my grandfather was who I called daddy, and he was my father figure, so I didn't really feel like I missed out on having that father figure, but I did see the challenges that my mom went through being a as a single mother. There's sacrifices I will never understand that she
mm,
made to give me the life that she gave. But as she's, again, making this transition into retirement or towards retirement herself, again, and seeing my grandfather, who I call daddy, pass away when
mm.
my grandmother was 62, I saw the challenges that she faced. And she is the definition of a matriarch. She is the center of our family. I actually just spent the last few days with her over Thanksgiving. She's 89 years old, and she's not as mobile as she would want to be. She's amazing. And again, seeing the decisions that she had to make when you're married for 40 years or so, actually probably more than that, so probably 45 years. I think she was 14 when they got married. But you think the decisions that you make together when you're trying to transition to retirement are tough. Now you got to do all those on your own.
Mm.
You got to make the right decisions on Social Security and income and all these things. Now they're all on your shoulders. And this is my grandmother was she had barely driven a car by herself, much less had to be having to make all these financial decisions by herself.
Right.
So when you start seeing some of these things, and I'm going to tell this story. My mom hates me when I tell this story, but I'm going to tell it. This is really before I really got really deep into retirement income planning and more
Mhm.
specifically retirement income plan for women. She remarried after my biological father was out of the picture, and actually a couple of times, but she made the wrong decision with Social Security. She was actually so several years ago, there was actually the option where you could start your spousal benefits, or in her case would have been ex-spousal benefits, and leave yours alone, let them keep growing until you get to 70. She could have done that, but she didn't understand those options. So instead, she chose to start Social Security, and she didn't. The worst part to me is she didn't really need the money. It was just, hey, this is just another source of income. But she started her own Social Security benefit rather than being able to start her spousal or ex-spousal benefits and let
Mm.
it keep growing till she's 70. I There's no way of estimating what that. I wouldn't go back and do that to her to say, okay, well, here's how much money you cost yourself,
Right.
but it's probably thousands of dollars, right? And again, just not understand. There's so many out there that are in that same situation where you don't think about if I got an ex-spouse, I don't really think about them, period, much less financially think about them. But understanding that those are the options that you have available that can make a difference, a significant difference in the success of your retirement. And do I even have enough? So I think that's really what's driven my passion around that. And just seeing some of the stories, I do a lot of volunteer for different organizations that focus on financial coaching for women as well, if they're not in the case might be. And some of the stories that I hear are just devastating. They just make you cry. And so I think that's a lot of it, all bringing all that together to say, okay, how can we make a difference in people's lives and
Mhm.
helping them make the right decisions, understanding Social Security, understanding taxes, understanding all these different pieces of the retirement puzzle to help women live the retirement they deserve.
I can only imagine how your upbringing has informed and impacted the work with your clients as well. I think there's also this piece, we talk about it a lot in healthcare advocacy. There's a missing piece of true health literacy. And right, that no one ever hands us a manual and says, this is how you navigate the healthcare system or any of the adulthood pieces, including financial literacy. And it sounds like you are trying to chip away at those pieces little by little, client by client, volunteer opportunity by volunteer opportunity. I think for women, there are unique challenges that can come with retirement planning. Some of that is those societal norms we referred to a little bit earlier. Are there particular financial hurdles you think people might need to be aware of or think about?
To share that I
Sure.
think would be impactful. Again, in the importance of Social Security gets a bad rap, and maybe justifiably, right? But realistically, you think about the statistics: 56% of all Social Security beneficiaries over the age of 62 are women.
Mm.
66% of all Social Security beneficiaries over the age of 85 are women. So, regardless of what your thoughts are about Social Security, that's a significant source of retirement income. It is the only, for most, that I'm going to say, for most, it is the only source of retirement income that is guaranteed for life and has an annual cost of living increase.
Mm.
Most people, if you happen to be the one of the lucky ones that still has a pension. My wife was a teacher for 25 years, so she's got a pension coming at some point. But the state of Texas had one increase in the last 10 years.
Mm.
So there is no think of it, you might just go whatever you get when you retire, that's what you're gonna
Right.
get for the rest of your life. So you think about the impact of saying so many of these teachers retire when they're maybe in their mid-50s, once they hit their magic 80, and once they start getting that whatever that amount is, it doesn't go up over time, at least not enough. So you think about the impact that Social Security can have, And then we get into, hey, I had a spouse that passed away. I actually have a story. And it's interesting that with this question, had a story that, there's a question on Facebook. So I've got, on our
Mhm.
Facebook page, I have a couple of different posts and different things. So somebody asked the question, and this again stresses the importance of understanding these rules. So she was married for over 20 years, father of her children, divorced, remarried 6 days before her 60th birthday. And if you're not familiar, 60 is an important age, right?
Mhm.
Remarried 6 days before her 60th birthday. Within a few years, her ex husband, father of her children, passes away.
Mhm.
She can't do anything about it. There's no possibility of getting those benefits. You can't, if you remarry before the age of 60, you're no longer eligible for a survivor benefit based on an ex spouse. 6 days. It doesn't mean that she would have chosen to start those benefits. Who knows? But she would have had the option.
Right, and
Now,
she would have made an informed decision.
and that's the one again,
Mhm.
that's the tricky part. But she's not eligible until her second husband passes, assuming he predeceases her. She'll actually have the option to choose which of those two benefits is higher. She'll get to take that, but not until he passes because
Mhm.
she got married 6 days before her 60th birthday. So, to me, that understanding Social Security is such a critical component, such a big piece of that retirement puzzle that I think it just, again, the bad rap, yeah, and it wasn't, and that's the other thing, it wasn't designed to be used the way it's designed today. Social Security started in 1935.
Mhm.
It was insurance. It was insurance for the people that lived beyond 60. So if they lived to 65, they had 3 years of benefits, right?
Right.
Now everybody's living to 80, 85, 90, having started Social Security in their 60s. That's not what it was designed for. So yes, I understand why people about it, but it's such an important component of the retirement planning process.
With longevity and life expectancy and all of that changing, some of those thresholds have not changed to catch
Yes.
up with where we are in today's society as well. Do you feel like for women, some of the challenges around financial literacy, feeling like they have access to be seen and heard, right? That notion that people change their advisor because they were a supporting player in the conversation about financial planning, if that. And now they are, of course, the focus and seeking out a professional for whom that is how they work as well, being that good fit again. Do you think that women are now more and more aware of that and seeking out advisors and planners and certified planners who have that skill set, that knowledge, and that passion?
I think there's definitely progress being made. There's organizations out there again that I'm a part of, and
Mhm.
if it's okay to share, there's a
Sure.
group called Purse Strings.
Uh-huh.
So Barb Provost and her daughter Maggie Nielsen started this group called Purse Strings. It's an online education platform where they provide tons of education for women. And what they actually do, they have their what they call their purse strings approved providers. They've actually vetted some of these professionals in advance. So when somebody finds them and they say, okay, yeah, this all makes sense. I think I might need to find a financial advisor, financial planner, attorney, whatever it is that you might be looking for. These are folks that have committed to supporting women, that understand the women's market, and that's one of the things that, and I'll give Dr. Barb Provost a shout out here. So one of the things she tells that it's big on her radar about people talking about women being a niche market. Women are not a niche market, are the market. Look at the statistics about the wealth transfer over the next handful of years. It's all going to women. They're no longer a niche. They are the market. You're not, if you're not focused on them as a financial planner or a professional in general that deals with money, you're making a huge mistake. I think the progress is being made, but they think that also does fall, it needs to fall on the woman's shoulders as well to say, hey, this is not, I don't like investing. I don't like some of these things, but I need to be educated. I need to make sure I know enough to find the right support, the right advisor to help me make these decisions. Because they are, again, there's a lot of decisions you can make as you're transitioning into retirement where you don't get a do over. You make a Social Security mistake, there's a couple of things you might do if you're aware of them. Ultimately, there's very few do-overs that you get when it comes to retirement planning. And so I think seeking out guidance, finding trusted resources, knowing what's out there to help you If you don't like investing, you don't like some of these aspects, it doesn't get you around having to make decisions on those. But find support if you feel like you need guidance, the right guidance, and somebody that's
Right.
going to be patient and educate. And that's one of the things, having worked with women for many years now. I got to catch myself sometimes. I got to be patient. I got to say we got to focus on the education more than anything else. If I'm working with a lady who has experienced the loss of a husband and she has no idea what I'm talking about, or I'm going too fast, or making her feel like she's being rushed into a decision,
Mhm.
she might never make a decision. And that's going to negatively impact her as well.
Mhm.
But that's on my shoulders. So I've got to understand, what is it I can do to make sure I'm communicating effectively, being patient, taking time to educate her on what her options are, and helping her make the best decision under the circumstances.
Are there particular things that people who self-identify as solo agers ask differently than people who might be widowed or divorced? As you said, that coming into it looks different, that preparation for, and then that living in. Are there things that solo agers in particular ask that are more unique?
There can be. I think one of the things, especially if you have been a solo ager, you've been single for some period of time, there's things that pop up in your mind that are going to be different. A lot of times around things like healthcare, as you're well aware of, thinking, okay, what am I going to do if I need extended care? What am I going to do if I have to go into a facility? What happens about decision? If I can't make decisions for myself, who's going to make those? How do I prepare in advance in order to make sure that I get the care that I need, that things still get taken care of, knowing that it's not going to be a family member, it's not going to be a husband, it's not going to be somebody, and maybe it's not it, maybe there aren't children in the picture, or maybe the children are too far away, don't have a great relationship. Things can be in place,
Mhm.
but that's where you start thinking about, okay, not only do I need to figure out how I can plan for the retirement that I want to live, but what are my contingencies? What are these built-in things that I need to have in place? Because unfortunately, things don't always go perfectly when you're going through retirement. Have an illness, you're going to have an injury, you're going to have something that's going to require some type of medical care. Have you put the pieces in place to make sure that you can take care of those things, or delegate those to somebody who can step in on your behalf that you trust and can do those things for you?
Have clients asked about preparation for and support for pets? I've been finding that's something that clients are bringing up more and more in their planning, that if their pet outlives them or their pet is in need of support or resources and they move from being somewhere independent to somewhere they're not able, are people slowly folding that in? That's an aspect that to me is newer, that's on people's radar screens in terms of planning.
What I think that's where, again, having a team of professionals that
Right,
understand you and understand what's
right.
important to you, have that built into your estate plan. What's going to happen to my pet if something does happen to me? Who are they going to go to? Who's going to take care of them?
Mm,
And if it's more, hey, while I am alive, using somebody like a senior living advisor,
mhm,
senior living housing advisor that can say, hey,
mhm,
if you're going to be transitioning out of your home, let me help you find some place that accepts pets where you can take
mhm.
them with you. So you don't end up, I'd love this place and I've signed up and I'm good to go. Oh, they don't take my pet. So now what? Using the resources. And that's one of the things I've always focused on. A lot of my networking, what I people would refer as networking, is not to get referrals. They're great when they come and help them make good decisions, whether it's
Mhm,
estate planning related to their pet, their living arrangements, s- healthcare advocates, patient
mhm,
advocates that help think it. And again, back to the point of solo agers,
mm.
you need somebody. I've been a financial planner for 25 years, and I've dealt with things or seen things in the last 2 months that I had no clue about. And it's simply because if you're not doing it on a day-to-day basis, you just don't
Right.
understand the terminology and who do I talk to? And that's where part of my networking, I've got a couple of patient advocates here locally that I have great connections with. Hey, what do we do? Who do we talk? Who's the right person to go to? And unfortunately, some of the ultimate decision makers aren't always accepting of advice as I would like them to be.
Right.
But at least we're giving them the right direction and say, okay, to go talk to the case manager, because that's who's going to help them make the transition into or whatever it might be. And not even knowing that, again, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. I think that in and of itself is the title of a book or a podcast episode or 50. The notion that we don't know what we don't know. And so knowing that there are certified financial planners independent healthcare advocates, aging life care managers, formerly geriatric care managers. They had a rebranding. Elder law attorneys, all of
Mhm.
estate plan, knowing the lingo in and of itself can be a barrier to accessing the resources that one might need. And so I'm always appreciative of having as many conversations about those things with people, and especially with like minded people who approach their work the same way, which is delivering reliable resources to their clients to make an informed decision for themselves, whatever aspect, whether that's financial, health, etc., legal, that's really important. Do you think that there are some undervalued or not as appreciated sources of retirement income that people might overlook, uh, that you think might just mentioning it might be helpful on the radar screen, with the knowledge, of course, that you're just mentioning ideas. These aren't financial, right?
Yep.
This isn't a financial planning session by any means, but more tapping into your wealth of knowledge and resources.
Well, I think one of the things is people are more willing to continue working these days. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to continue working in the job that you've been working in for the last 30, 40 years, but maybe it's finding something else that you would want to do. Is it a flower shop or a museum or something where you're still bringing in a paycheck, which means less you may have to take out of your retirement accounts. But more than that is not only is it bringing in potential additional income, it's filling your time. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges anybody face, whether you're solo ager, married, whatever the case might be, is how do I fill my time? I've been working 8 to 12 hours a day or whatever it is for the last 40 years of my life. Now I've got all the time in the world. I don't know what to do. You can only, as they say, you can only play golf so many times, right?
Right.
So understanding what am I going to fill my time with? Maybe it is work. Maybe it is some situation where I can bring in income that way, but keep myself busy, stay in connection with people. And that's a big factor is just staying connected with your community, your friends, your work associates. But the other one I'll say is it's not necessarily an income source, but it's how do I maximize my income? And
Mm,
that's tax planning. And that's where understanding how we can reduce your lifetime tax liabilities. Thinking about things like if I've got an IRA, I've got a 401k, what about required distributions? If I
mm,
don't plan appropriately, Uncle Sam's going to get a way bigger chunk of that than is necessary. So it's planning out all these different income sources and the timing of these income sources that becomes really important when you're talking about minimizing how much you pay in taxes on those income sources. The less you pay in taxes, the longer your money's gonna last. So it's not, again, not as much of an income source, but maximizing the income that you do have, because that's where we talk about there's that wage gap. The stat
mhm.
that women on average make about 82 cents on the dollar for their male from as compared to their male counterparts. It's getting better, all those different things, yes. But if you make the right decisions, you make smart decisions around taxes, around Social Security, and around some of these other variables that we talked about, you can make up for some of these gaps as well. You may not have as much of biggest Social Security benefit. You may not have as much saved for retirement, but making important decisions, you could actually end up with a better lifestyle than somebody that might have more money, more income, but
Right.
doesn't know all these different things.
Mhm.
That isn't doesn't understand Social Security or doesn't understand tax planning and ends up with these big required distributions and end up paying more on Medicare premiums because they didn't plan ahead. All these different things. I think that's really where I talk about really probably three components to an effective retirement income plan. It's optimizing your Social Security, which is different than maximizing. Maximizing and maximizing are not the same. Tax planning, paying as little in taxes as reasonably possible, but pay our fair share. Again, I don't want to make it sound like we don't want to pay our fair share. Pay your fair share, but let's not give Uncle Sam a tip.
Right.
And then investing smarter and investing in a way that, hey, if I retire at 65, my life expectancy is no longer that average of 78 to 80. It's now probably 85 to 90, 65 years old. So people don't always grasp that. Once you've hit 65, your life expectancy is now above average. So if you retire at 65 and you need to, and you may end up living to 90, 95, how do you make sure your assets last as long as you might need them to? And that's where making good decisions, making educated decisions can make such a huge impact. Tax planning, again, being one of those, helping your money last longer than it might otherwise.
Do most of your clients come to you having somewhat of a plan in place? One of the things about healthcare advocacy is that sometimes we enter the picture to be able to support a client and or their support network if that's available in crisis mode, far down that continuum, as opposed to the ideal of proactive, that we think about who will we need on our team. I refer to it as a micro board of directors. Who is our support network, right? The blend of professional and personal. Do clients come to you with a plan, even if it's an infrastructure of a plan in place, and and you help them flesh it out? Is there that Are you starting to see that proactive approach more?
I think that they really are clients who come to us, and there's always a level of urgency, right? Clients are usually less than 5 years from retirement. The urgency is more, okay, I've done all this up until this point. Yes, they've had a plan to this point, but now the plan changes. It's not how do I put as much money away as I
Right.
can into my company retirement plans or my IRAs or whatever. Now the urgency is how do I start getting that money out? How do I start living on that money? And that's the part that trips people up
Mhm.
because it's a completely different ball game now when you're trying to figure out how do I actually turn this asset that I've accumulated into an income source. But then we also have folks that actually, if a situation where it's a widow and they've all of a sudden they've lost their husband and now
Mm.
they've got life insurance proceeds and now that becomes the source of income. How do I turn a life insurance death benefit into a income source?
Mhm.
Or I've just gone through a significant divorce. My view of what I thought retirement was going to look like over the last 30 years is completely turned up on its head. Now I'm on my own. I've got to figure out how do I still live or how do I'm still going to have to retire. I can't work forever. How do I turn the assets that I've received as part of the divorce decree? How do I turn that into an income? But as an example, and so a lot of so it really they come to us in just different versions depending on what their circumstances
Right.
are. But just recently, one of our newer clients, it's actually a couple. So people do ask me, "Hey, do you work with couples?" My answer is yes. However, one big caveat: if we're going to work together as a couple, you both have to be involved. It's not the husband comes into the meetings and the wife just stays at home because she doesn't like dealing with this stuff. You're both coming in. You're both going to be part of the conversation. Otherwise, we're not a good fit. But he found us. He was doing searches. They're actually local. We're in the historic area of McKinney, Texas.
Mhm.
He's local, probably a mile and a half from us. He was just doing a search for local financial advisors. He saw our website and he saw that yes, that it says our website says retirement planning for women over 55. But he still reached out. And the reason he reached out is said, "Hey, we've done a great job of accumulating money, but there's an age difference. I'm a few years older than my wife. I want to know that if something happens to me, she's going to be okay." So when you think about, do these many of our clients, yet they have a plan, but there's something more. There's something more they're looking for beyond just a typical financial advisor to manage the investments. Peace of mind that they're looking for to say, hey, they've accumulated a good amount of assets, done a lot of great things. He makes a good income. She, again, typical scenario. She's been out of the workforce for probably 20 years, caring for her parents.
Mm.
Story I'm sure you're well aware
Yes.
of. So she's
Yes.
been out for 20 plus years taking care of her parents they had gone through illnesses and both have since passed. But that was his big thing was, I want to know that if something happens to me, she's going to be okay. And that's why they reached out to us. So our clients are very smart. They've done a lot of great things. They could let, I never want to say they couldn't do what I do for them. But number one, I do this every day, just like you, again, talking about
Mhm.
your service and what you do this every day, the terminology, the right questions to ask. Same thing for us. They could probably figure out if they had the time to do it. But that's one of the things I tell them. I don't want you to take time to understand all this stuff, to read tax law. That's what I do. I read tax law, not read tax law, but I do.
Right.
I raise my hand for that one. I want them to spend time doing the things they want to do. That they want to spending time with family or traveling, whatever it is that's driving them, whatever that picture, we talked about the picture of retirement, what they want that to
Mhm.
look like. I want you focused on that. I don't want you thinking about the day-to-day stuff. Let me handle that. You do the things that you want to do.
Again, the professional being able to be one part of the team, but in an objective way where emotion doesn't come into it in the same way. One of the benefits to working with any professional that way is that there is that objectivity. There isn't, of course, we care very much for our clients. That's not to say we don't, but there isn't that inherent baked in level of emotional stress, strain, perspective, and that can be very helpful to clients. I really like that example because it talks about so many things. How important language is when professionals are sharing what they do and how they do it so that you're able to see yourself on someone's website and someone's elevator pitch, whatever that is, and be able to extrapolate that out in knowing that you have that priority in working with clients in that way, in that particular slice of the demographic, that the prospective client saw you as a good fit for them going forward. That's really instructive and reflects on some of the things one asks of those 10 questions in that podcast episode. We'll make sure to link in the show notes because those are some of the nuanced things that people don't always think about and are equally important in terms of outcomes. I think your approach to work is fantastic, and I can only presume that your clients really benefit from that and have benefited from that for all of the years that you have been doing this and taking what you've learned and applying it to clients. We've touched on a lot of different things. I'm sure we could have hours long conversations about all of this. I have a couple of other kind of personalist ish type questions. But is there anything that you feel like we blatantly missed that you really wanted to make sure we covered in this conversation before we just wrap up with a couple of lighthearted questions?
No, I think we've hit a lot. I think the biggest thing I can suggest is, especially if you're a woman, solo ager, making the transition into retirement or retired, just know there's resources out there. Be willing to reach out, find a connection, find some of the resources that are out there. Be willing to ask for help. But know, again, have an idea, educate yourself enough to know to see if you can make sure you're asking the right questions to accomplish what you want to accomplish, and not just expect the financial advisor to tell you what to do,
Right.
because ultimately it's your decision, it's your money. But having the right guidance in place makes it that much more important.
Right. So shifting gears just a little bit, if there is a skill or a talent that you instantly would be able to master when even if it's when you're thinking about all the different ways to impact clients, what would it be and why?
Public speaking.
Ah,
I think it's an obvious response, but thinking about that's one of the ways that we can impact people's lives is by the public speaking. And it's not that I don't do it or can't do it, but it's a lot of times I get emotional. So every year, and so International Women's Day is March
mhm.
8th. We do an event on March 8th every year. Unfortunately, like 2025 is going to be on March 7th because the 8th falls on a Saturday, if in case nobody knew that. Uh, but I get up and I tell my story to the women that are there, and I always break down. And yeah, that's just me. But getting better at public speaking, being able to communicate the message, provide education, provide resources, that would be again, I do it. I guess I could say I'm okay at it, but I can always get better. And if one of the things you just immediately snap your fingers and you're the best out there, it would make a significant difference, I think.
I think that's an aspiration for many of us who do community education. I would say the showing your vulnerability, showing your passion about this a subject is not a bad thing. So there's also that. But I can understand how you also play that into a skill set as well. And I think that we all would love to instantly just snap our fingers and all be genius orators.
I had it. So it's funny. I had a client that at the last event in March this past in 2024. I started off my telling my story. I said, "How many times can I tell this story?" And she said, "Every time. Tell it every time. I don't care if you cry. I don't care what you do. Tell your story every single time." And I gave her a shout out at the last event for encouraging me no matter how
Yeah,
I do it, just do it.
exactly. And we also never know sometimes the community education, the conversations, the initial consultations, the whatever, we don't know how that's impacted someone. And we may see an immediate, right, outcome. Someone may call us 6 years from now or not, but have still applied something that we've shared in our own experience and our own expertise. So I echo that. I share it every time is a great piece of advice, which is actually what I was just going to ask you about in terms of over your professional life, personal life. Is there a piece of advice you've been offered besides share your story every time that has really stuck with you over the years and you use it as a driving force for you?
Uh, it always comes back to understanding your it is that you're doing what you're doing. And one of my favorite books, and I'm sure you probably read it, but by Simon Sinek is Business and the Business Do the Things They Do. And there's a lot you can take it from it on a personal level to drive you in what you're doing. Is that because money is just an object, it's just a thing, a tool.
Right.
Money is what's driving you. And at some point, you're gonna run into a brick wall. So once I understood that, and that's where, because honestly, I haven't always focused my practice on working with women. So
Mhm.
it's always happened naturally. So we've always had a number of women clients. And again, probably because of my story and the way I talk and educate and those types of things. But that was the point where I said, okay, not only am I going to focus primarily on working with women, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to do all these other things. I'm going to volunteer for organizations that provide financial coaching to women. We're going all in. But there was the why. It's the why. There's a reason why I wanted to do that, and that's what drives a lot of my decision making. And regardless of the financial implications, it's I know we're making a significant difference in women's lives in some form or another, whether they're clients, they're not clients. That's as with a podcast, that's your way of touching many lives
Mm.
beyond who you can help directly. I can
Right.
only we may, our focus is be maybe 100 clients.
Mm.
We got about 70 clients now. We might get to 100. We might make some tweaks and things to go above that. There's only so many people we can work with
Right.
directly, but with a podcast or volunteering, we can touch so many more lives and make a difference. But it starts with why. Why are you doing that?
Mhm.
That's always been find your why and just go all in.
That's a great book. His work is really great on discussing leadership and all of those pieces, and really having that core sense of your why is a really important piece, and I think probably plays into as people are planning for retirement, can also, right, be a
Absolutely.
major factor as well.
Well,
It has
it's the
been
idea that it's the idea of not you don't want to retire. You want to retire to something, not from something.
right.
So what is it? What's that next phase of life? I always talk about at the end of my podcast. I always say, just remember, retirement is not the end of the road. It's the start of a new journey.
Mhm.
But you got to know where you're going.
Right, and you need a map for that, and good people to help you along the way. When we
That's
used
right.
to not just rely on an automated voice to tell us what direction to go in, that doesn't work for this. It's been a wonderful conversation. Like I said, we could easily continue. For our listeners, you can find out more about Eric and his work on the Blake Wealth Management website, which is blakewealthmanagement.com. And we
Yep.
will be sure to include that website link in the show notes. And also, if someone's watching this, we also include a slide at the end for people to be able to hit pause and look at that information so they can also take note of that as well. So, for our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Navigating Solo podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, or and review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any questions or topic suggestions or guest suggestions, we are always looking for really interesting guests, both professionals who are well versed in the needs of solo agers as well as solo agers sharing their own stories. You can email us at podcast@navigatingsolo.com. Until next time, stay empowered and stay connected. I'm your host, Aileen Gerhart, and this is the Navigating Solo podcast. Our disclaimer for today's episode: content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously, This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Blake Wealth Management. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Blake Wealth Management or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RSG Advisory, a registered environment advisor. Blake Wealth Management and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.